morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Economies, Residents and Community Scrutiny Committee today, Monday, the 5th of June. I just want to start by welcoming the new members of this committee. That's Councillor Corrina Kenyon-Wade, Councillor Glyn Preston and Councillor Liz. Liz is here somewhere. Yeah. So I'd just like to welcome you all. So we'll start on the agenda with apologies. So do we have any apologies today, Rachel?
We've got apologies from Councillor David Thomas, and Councillor Richard Church will be joining us shortly. He's just doing an update. And apologies from officers Diane Reynolds and Nigel Bryn. Lovely,
thank you very much. Okay, so item 2 on our agenda is to the election of the vice chair of this committee. So do we have any nominations? Over to you again, Rachel.
We haven't received any nominations, Chair, so I don't know if you want to open it up to the floor.
Okay, members, I'm in your hands. So I promise you I'm a very nice chair. If somebody would like to work with me over the next 12 months, that would be lovely. So if anybody's interested in learning a bit more about how the committee works behind the scenes, it's not an onerous task. Obviously, you would stand in as chair if I'm absent. So I'm in your hands. Be brave. And silence, tumbleweed across the screen. So Rachel, what do we do with that?
Do you want me to carry it forward to the next meeting, Chair?
I think that's perhaps a good idea. Give everybody a time to have a little think about it.
Okay, I'll do that, no problem.
Councillor Carl, you've got your hands up. You're going to come to my rescue there.
Yes, Chair. I'm happy to put my name forward again if no one else wants to. I'm not sure if I can nominate myself.
Yes, Chair, that's fine. As long as there's a seconder.
So anybody, oh, lots of seconders there, Carl. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Carl, for putting yourself forward. Thank you to all those putting their hands up to second, Carl. I'd be absolutely delighted to work with you for a second year. So that's really good news. Thank you very much. Okay, so item 3 on our agenda, disclosures of interest. Do we have any disclosures today? No, excellent. And any declarations of party whip? And again, we'll take silence to mean no. So item 5 is the minutes of the previous meeting. I would hope that you've all had a chance to read through those. They're there on our agenda pack, pages 5 onwards. So has anybody got any comments or amendments they'd like to make to those? I can assure you myself and my vice chair, Councillor Carl, we've had these in advance and had a look and we're happy with them, but this is your opportunity to make any comment. So again, I'll take silence to mean that you're happy with those, and we'll move on to item 6, which is recruitment. And we have Gemma Gabriel with us here today, Professional Lead for Human Resources Management and Development. So a nice snappy title there, Gemma, and we're in your hands.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will just share my screen for you, so hopefully you'll be able to see that. So I've just put together a brief presentation, which is in your packs. So hopefully that's coming up. Can you see that?
We can, yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll keep it like that if that's okay, just so I can see anybody then, and any hands come up. Otherwise, I'll lose you. So I'll go to the beginning now. So just wanted to briefly cover today, I was just asked to come and talk to you just around how we're addressing the recruitment challenges in Powys. So I just thought I'd run through a little bit about what we're doing. So the first part is, what is that challenge and why do we need transformational change? And what are we doing about it? We've already started that work. So what have we achieved to date? And what's next? You know, it's going to be quite a big project and there's still quite a lot that we need to do. So we'll look at, you know, what the core plans are, and then an opportunity hopefully for a little bit of discussion, or if you've got any queries on what we're doing or anything you think we should be particularly looking at. So what are the challenges then? So obviously effective recruitment and retention is essential to ensure that we've got the right people in place with the right skills, the right talent in order to deliver our services in our communities, both now and also in the future. So we need to think through what our services are going to look like in the future and prepare for that to make sure that we've got the skills and the talent in place. There's difficulties in recruiting to a number of vacancies across our services. Some of that is aligned to national challenges. So you'll have heard about HGV drivers in the news, social care, particularly social workers, is another national problem. But we've also got some local challenges as well in Powys. Some of that is we've got a low unemployment rate, which is good on the one hand, but then it does mean that we've got a limited pool at which we can attract people to come and work for us. We're also an ageing population, which is consistent across Wales, but we do have the highest percentage in Wales. So it is a particular challenge for us in Powys. We don't have any university in Powys. So our young people, if they want to go to university, leave the county and don't always come back to the county. So that's another challenge that we experience. So it's about how we create an alternative then for that group so that they remain in Powys or they return. And also that we recognise that some of our systems and processes need updating. So those are particular local challenges that we've got. And ultimately, all of that presents a risk to the council of delivering its services and resulted in a significant need for change and for us to look specifically at recruitment and retention. So what are the plans? Well, a recruitment and retention project group was set up. The format and governance of that has changed slightly, but essentially we've got a group that meets every Monday, and it's a core group of people from across various services in the council, and we are working on the transformation and agile approach to change. So we're looking at specific elements, changing that, putting things in place, reviewing it, adapting it if we need to, and doing something else, but making sure that we're continually moving and putting some improvements in place. So that project group looks at policy, systems and processes. So looking at how we identify areas of improvement and then implement those changes and maximise the use of technology that we've got as much as possible. That we improve the collection and analysis of data so that we can review and identify those particular areas of difficulties that we've got in Powys and those challenges so that we can put plans in place to overcome them. But also, as we're seeing a little bit more, using that data to review the impact of some of the initiatives that we're putting in place, that we know what works, what doesn't work, so that we can adapt our approach if we need to. We want to enhance the routes of employability to the council. So this includes further apprenticeships and graduate opportunities, but also looking at career pathways so that we're really clear what opportunities there are for people when they join us here in Powys. To ensure managers are supported and trained in effective recruitment principles and practices, and also that workforce planning and development element so that managers can foresee any difficulties so that we can try and tackle those at an earlier stage. Understand any retention challenges, and to do that we need to engage better with staff to understand what their experiences are, and also to review our reward and recognition strategies so that it supports again that retention of staff, as well as being able to attract people to come and work for us. So some of the things that we've done to date is we launched a new recruitment brand. So hopefully you've seen some of that, which is that pink and the black and white photographs. And again, that was just to try and be a bit more creative and to stand out. Development and launch of a new website. There were some challenges around our recruitment site that we were really limited on what we could put on that front site and how people searched for vacancies. So working with ICT colleagues, they've built a new website that sits over the front of that Trent system. So it's branded, so it supports our branding and what we're trying to promote, but also it makes it easier for applicants to search the vacancies that we've got. We've undertaken a number of successful recruitment campaigns, and you'll see that I attached some data around that we've analysed recently of a number of recruitment campaigns that we've undertaken. I can go through that in a little bit more detail if you like towards the end. But essentially, with the exception of social work, which remains a particular challenge for us, there've been some really good results that we've seen from some of that work. And I think what that's highlighted for us is that we need a bespoke approach for each vacancy that's localised and focuses on the specific benefits of the role and the specific post. One approach doesn't fit or suit every vacancy, that we need to be proactive and creative. We need to go out to people. They're not going to necessarily come to us. And one of the biggest successes there was the trades roles in housing, where the teams in housing were going out to Robert Price car parks on a Saturday morning, taking one of our branded vans and the tools, so people could actually see what they would be working with, and they were were going where they thought people in those trades would be on a Saturday morning. So it's just trying to be more creative and proactive as much as we can, and having that bespoke approach. But also that a small investment is required. We can't just rely on our website alone. So for social media, there are ways for a very small amount that we can push those vacancies so that we're promoted more on Facebook. We've also done a leaflet drop recently for some of our social care vacancies, and we're measuring the success of that as well. So we're just trying to test out a couple of different approaches to see what works, and it won't work for all of them. We developed an easy apply process for certain hard to recruit positions. So we're able to roll this out for everything, but for some particular hard to recruit roles, we've simplified the process. So people don't necessarily have to fill out a full application form in order to apply. They still need to complete that process later in the process, but it's a way of us engaging with them and promoting our vacancies and having a conversation with them at a much earlier stage. And for some of those roles, that's proved really successful too. We've hosted a number of recruitment events, but we've also attended a number of others. And hopefully you've seen a number of housing vehicles that have been wrapped in our branding, driving around the county. And again, all of that is just hard to highlight the fact that, you know, Powys is recruiting. Implemented improved ways to measure the success of initiatives. So that's really important for us, is how we know what works and what doesn't work for specific roles. So for example, that leaflet drop, there's a specific QR code on that leaflet that we can track how many people then looked at our website specifically from that leaflet. So obviously there will be other variables as well that might have encouraged somebody to attend an event, but it's just ways of just trying to track as much as possible what's working for us. We implemented a guaranteed interview scheme for veterans, and there's some further work being undertaken around that as well, so that we can perhaps do some events to highlight again some of our career opportunities for veterans in the future. A working group has been set up to review and implement revised processes for gathering information and data from leavers. So again, it's really important for us to understand if people are leaving, why are they leaving? But equally a step before that, because when people are leaving, they're already on their way out the door. So what are we doing to try and gather that information that stage earlier? And some of the ways in which we do that is through flight risk surveys. So we encourage people to complete a survey that highlights whether they're thinking about leaving and the reasons for that. So it gives us that opportunity to try and intervene or to try and set something up. But equally, if we then are trying and working with people, if they do decide to leave us for whatever reason, they leave as advocates, and they're more likely to either then tell others how good we are as an employer, or they may well come back to us once they've got that different experience elsewhere. So it's looking at that whole employee journey and cycle, and making sure that we're engaging with employees at every stage. We've undertaken a Why Powys survey to understand why people work for Powys and why they might be looking to leave. That was to complement some of that retention work. And some of those quotes now we use on our recruitment campaigns. And creating better links with education providers to promote opportunities at Powys with learners, so that they really understand what the career opportunities are that we've got. And also offering those opportunities again with the trades. Some of the team within housing were going out to the colleges to promote our vacancies for those who are due to qualify. So they're saying, well, okay, you might not be qualified now, but still apply, because we've got a number of vacancies and we might be able to give you a provisional offer on a subject of you gaining your qualification. So really just trying to engage more with education providers. Leads us on to apprenticeship. So we relaunched the apprenticeship talent pool to coincide with National Apprenticeship Week. So we've now got in excess of 100 individuals who are actively seeking opportunities with us. So we are engaging with them, and we know that they are actively looking. We applied the real living wage to apprentices, which was fantastic, and I think contributed to that significant increase in applications. But also the demographic of those applications has shifted a little bit as well. So traditionally it might be your school leavers or college leavers or graduates that might have been interested in those, but because of the real living wage, we're seeing that people in their 30s, 40s and above are applying for that apprenticeship talent pool. And I think it's because it's seen as a viable opportunity for people to change direction, which is great. So we're trying to capitalise on that as well and offering those opportunities. we introduced an internal process to ensure all vacancies grade 8 and below are considered as potential apprenticeship opportunities. So they won't all be appropriate, particularly fixed term, because we need to offer a certain amount of time for them. And for some, there will be experience and skills required at that point. However, it's about putting a process in place that means that we review that and we challenge our thinking. Do we really need somebody that's got the full qualification at that point, or could we provide an opportunity? And in the last 2 months, we've appointed 4 apprentice, or offered 4 apprentice fitters. It was only 2, but due to the quality of applicants that they received, they've now gone away and created 2 other opportunities to offer to 2 more individuals. So that's a real success story for them. And we've also got 3 out at the moment, and there are others being planned. Services are thinking about the roles and the vacancies that they could pull into apprenticeship opportunities. So that's just a brief summary of some of the things that we've done to date. So what's next? There's still a lot to do. We're continuing to develop our brand and to promote Powys as an employer of choice. We're undertaking a fundamental review of our recruitment and onboarding systems and implementing improvements. We've done some quick wins with various different elements of our onboarding process, and that website was a part of that. But we do need a fundamental review of our systems to make sure that we're not having any barriers in place for people to apply for us. So that's a key piece of work that we're looking at the moment. Conclude work around gathering data from leavers, so making sure that that exit process we've got in place works and we're consistent and we're doing something with that information. Considering the feasibility of a 4-day working week, which I'm sure will help us in our recruitment and retention efforts. Linking the project work as well with the wider people strategy, so that whole employee journey that I spoke about and the people strategy that sits underneath that, making sure that everything that we're doing complements each other. And make further improvements to the gathering of data so that it's informing us where our priority areas are, where we need to put in our effort, and also measuring the success of those initiatives so that we know what's working and what isn't working. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So just any questions really, or queries?
Well, thank you very much for Gemma. I mean, that's clearly a really important area of research and development, because without the staff, at the end of the day, the council can't deliver its services, can it? So yeah, I open the floor to the committee. Any questions? And Councillor Carl, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I really have to take my hat off to the current administration with regards to recruitment with apprentices in the trades. Really, really good. I have to say that it was really good news, full council, when we heard about it. Just want to know what's been done on, refuge collections, recruitment for staff, that on that side of things with Matt and Councillor Jackie. What are you doing there? Because obviously Councillor Glyn and myself suffered from miscollections last week, and I certainly got a lot of heat for it. I'm sure Glyn got equal amount up on his end as well. So just wondering what's been done there to try and attract personnel into that section.
I'm happy to pick that up, Chair.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, it has been a problem. We are finding now that we are getting back to the normal levels, but there's been extensive work to try and get that opportunity to bring people in. We are obviously, from an HGV point of view, competing with the private sector, and whatever way you look at it, there are private sector organisations that are paying more, so that's always going to be a challenge. But we're trying to sell the benefits of work for Powys, the pension scheme, the sickness, it's all those hidden things that sometimes people don't realise that attract. But numbers are back to the levels, but we do need to do more. And working with Gemma's team, we are looking at getting more sort of more candidates in. So I specifically, I can't say what it is exactly, but we are doing a wide range of and the other thing we did last year, we did bring in contractors from RMS to assist as well in terms of for HGV drivers. But it is an issue right across throughout the UK. So it's not just specific to Powys, and I know that doesn't answer the issues you've got in particular. If an HGV driver is down, then obviously that impacts on the collection rounds. But there is work ongoing. So we haven't sort of kicked it into the long grass. We are still pushing because what I'd like to see is that we've got a pool over and above of what we need. So then if there's any sickness, then we can obviously bring people in. But just to be assured, we are still pushing on it.
Matt, can I just ask you to say RMS? What does that stand for? You're bringing contractors in from RMS.
Yeah, RMS is one of our highways contractors. So in the winter period when they were short of work, then we utilize their drivers then for I can't think of the name of it. Paul may know if he's
from within Powys County Council.
No, they're external.
Okay, external contractors. Okay, thank you for explaining
Can I
that.
come back on that one, Chair, please?
Yes, please do.
Whenever I've talked to staff who've left refuge collection, it always, as you rightly point out, Matt, it always comes down to money and competing with the private sector, as you say. Is there any flexibility with grading of staff, or where we could sort of up the grade a little bit or stretch it to the furthest ends of that grade to retain staff and keep staff within that discipline?
I know this some of you, I don't know if Emma wants to.
I was just going to say, I can see Emma's waving her hand at us. Good morning, Emma, welcome.
Good morning. If I may, Chair, Councillor Carl, absolutely, we can look at market comparisons, and that's something that we've been focusing on in particular areas at the moment. So we've done market comparison around social care, we've done market comparison in terms of planning areas. So it's a matter of doing that across the organisation and then understanding that. So yeah, absolutely a piece of work, and part of that wider ongoing work that Gemma's referring to. The list is long that we've got to continue to work through. And I think, if I may, also the other aspects that Matt and the team have done is they have been put in individuals through their HGVs. So that's part of the ongoing in terms of the development. So actually somebody could be working with us who don't currently have a HGV license that we committed to in terms of the development in that area. We then have contracts in place, so very similar to social work or any other area, that where we do invest in the development of individuals, then there's a commitment to stick with us for so many years. So that's another aspect that the team have been working on. Okay,
and so one more question, if I may, please, Chair. Around planning, what are we doing with apprentices, university spaces for offices going forward? I think that's very important. We should be looking at that as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things I'm really passionate about, and the team are looking at in respect of, we've got a draft organisational development plan that we didn't have in place until recently. As I say, it is draft and not signed off yet. But one of the elements is around that graduate aspect. I think there's more we can do in terms of the opportunities that we can offer graduates, and really reach out to the universities and things like bursaries for staff, very much like the private sector would operate. So I think what we've got to do, and I know that Gemma and the team are working hard around all these points, but we've had to look at some of the quick wins first, because we can't do it all straight away, as I'm sure you appreciate. But nevertheless, we've got to operate in terms of recruitment of 21st century, not in traditional council territory, and we've got to act more like the private sector. And I think that's what we're bringing to the fore, and I think that's why we're starting to see some of the benefits that we're seeing. So yeah, absolutely, reaching out, graduates, bursaries. We've got the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that also assists us in terms of the recruitment aspect as well. So it's just about thinking differently and using the mechanisms.
Sorry, could you direct us to where we can signpost people for these courses and funding, etc.? Have you got it on your webpage somewhere? Because I find it very difficult to find anything, and there doesn't seem to be anything on social media either relating to apprenticeship places for university for planning.
Yeah, no, so with that's the element that we're working on now in terms of
Right.
the research around graduates. That's in this year. That hasn't
Right.
happened yet.
Right.
Obviously, if we've got, well, not obviously, sorry, if we've got people already recruited within the organisation, everyone has their own development plan through their annual appraisal, 6-monthly review. But in terms of reaching out to new recruits, that's an area that we need to focus on. That's a piece of work we need to do.
Okay.
The only element that would be on the website already would be the talent pool around apprenticeships. But of course, graduate is different, and that's something that I'm really keen that we explore.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jackie, you've got your hand up. Did you want to speak on this point before?
Well, it's purely because Councillor Cole directed a question at me, so I don't know whether he still wants me to respond because he's had quite a bit of response already. But I did just want to say that we understand the recruitment processes. We do know that there are problems. It does seem to be worse in the north and south. We don't have the same issues that you have around your wards of Councillor Glynn and Councillor Carl. It does seem to be you that keeps coming up for some reason. But I just wanted to say that I know in waste and recycling, we've worked very, very closely with HR on recruitment, and they've been very good at listening to some of the things that we've been saying as well. And I think the one that came across, and it was part of the presentation as well, was to make the application forms easier, because I think we all found that, you know, that was something that would put people off. They had these enormous great application forms and thought, well, none of this it actually applies to me, so it put them off applying in the first place. The other issue that we have, and I think that we may well have overcome that now, is that some of the HGV drivers were having to drive quite a long way just to get to their place of work. And it was the amount of money that it was costing them to do that, which sent them back across the border into England because it was closer to their homes to work. Now, I'm not sure that we're ever going to overcome that, but I do suspect that, you know, we may be bringing people back in. And I think the other thing I wanted to say as well, as Matt has said, we do bring in contractors, and it works very well for us because actually they can be brought in straight away and covers some of the gaps that we have. But just to reassure you, it's not like in the health service where bringing in agency workers in as nurses costs probably twice as much as it costs to employ a nurse. We don't have that problem. It's not far, and I think Matt can probably back me up on this. It's around about the same cost. So it's not costing us extras to bring those contractors in. So if we can rely on good contractors, and we know we can rely on them, it's actually a good way of filling in those gaps. But just to say, I think the one thing I wanted to say was how well we are now working with HR on making sure that we can overcome those recruitment gaps. And finally, I'm also trying to encourage wherever I can is to look a little bit differently. We're looking at things differently. Maybe the 4-day week is going to help us out on this one, but to look a little bit differently and bring in, you know, perhaps look at gender as well. We don't have enough women in waste and recycling. Those that we do have are extremely good, very committed workers. And I think if we can look at recruitment in a way of actually encouraging more women to come into the service as well, I think we could also plug gaps there that the other areas may find that it's causing a problem. So I just wanted to say those things as well. But thank you, Councillor Cole, for asking those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Jackie. So now on to Councillor Peter. You've had your hand up a while now.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the actual questions have been answered actually from Cole's input. First of all, Gemma, I think the presentation is fantastic, but I was just thinking that we've done a lot of promotion in wrapping vehicles within Powys, and being that Powys itself has got quite an older residence as well, I'm just interested in knowing how the recruitment campaign goes out to colleges and unis, as most of the young people are moving out of Powys to get their education, and how we get the word out to them, what offers are available within Powys, and for them to sort of be notified what's available to come back home to work.
No, thank you. It's really interesting because I think particularly the opportunities are there more for some roles than others, particularly the flexible worker roles, whilst it's given us the opportunity with more remote working that we can then encourage others to come work for us because they don't necessarily need to be in Powys, but equally that then means that some of our own staff have got opportunity as well to apply elsewhere where otherwise they might have been a little bit tied to Powys. So we do look at social media is obviously a big platform for us, so we can go nationally with that. But we've also been looking at attending some other recruitment fairs that are outside of county. So there are some, for example, in Cardiff that are focused perhaps on social care that we've been to. There's one in Manchester in the next couple of months that we're exploring. So you're absolutely right. We do need to kind of broaden that and encourage people to come to Powys. And also it's about highlighting the benefits. Not very often we say how beautiful Powys is, but actually there's a lot more to Powys than that as well. So some of our promotional material is about showing that actually, yes, it is beautiful, but there's also really close links to other places. So it's just around how we try and promote the benefits of Powys as a whole, and try and understand also what other people want. So what might attract them to come and work for us. And that's where those recruitment fairs are quite interesting, because then we get that feedback from potential applicants and try and understand. The Welsh language is another one. There's sometimes an assumption that to work in Wales, you've got to speak Welsh. So again, it enables us at some of those recruitment fairs to kind of explain that a little bit more.
Very good. I mean, is there a way of tracking the young members that go to uni? Like sort of, are they more going to Aberystwyth, Cardiff, Manchester? And that way you're actually, doing the advertising a key point where they're actually going. I don't know if that's a point to take into consideration.
Yes, not something that we've particularly looked at yet, but yes, certainly I think that is something that we can look at, so that we can track those individuals and then at the right time then promote what opportunities we've got here. And also I think we're getting in a position where we're also providing a real alternative to that university, so that apprenticeship model and the career pathways. And so I think for some it will be a real option as to perhaps they don't go to university in the first place, that actually there's an opportunity to work, get paid, get some experience and get your qualifications at the same time. But equally there will be those who do want to go to university, so it's how do then we engage and provide opportunities for them to come back. And that's the work that Emma was talking about earlier around the graduate schemes.
Exactly, yeah. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can see, Emma, you've just put your hand up again. So you want to add some comments to that?
If I may, Chair, I think there's really helpful questions from Councillor Peter and Councillor Carl so far. And I'm making notes actually, because I think some of the contributions that you're making already will help us with work that we need to undertake. So thank you very much for those points. I also wanted to make the broader aspect around that earn and learn. And I think at a point where children may have completed GCSEs and or go on to A levels, or maybe from GCSEs go more vocational, big decisions about their future, and not everyone feels ready to make those big decisions. And Chair, can you still hear me? Because everyone's frozen. That's okay. This is just frozen on my screen. And the point I wanted to make really is that I don't think young people necessarily understand the breadth and the offer that's available from the council, because we can offer so many different career options that actually we need to find a way that helps people navigate some of those opportunities and understand the breadth. So when I joined the council as a clerk typist, I was joining temporarily and I did not appreciate that breadth that was on offer. And yet I've had the opportunity to work right the way from that point through to a director level, with all of my education being funded by government, not necessarily by Powys County Council, but as I said, taking those wider opportunities. I didn't know about programme management, project management. I wasn't from a family background that even entered that world, or the different elements. And so I just think there's something more that we can do, where our young people may not know what they want to do in life, but actually we can offer the opportunity for them to trial different things, because we are a vast organisation that hopefully then secures their future within Powys and hopefully with us as an organisation. And so there's just something there about us thinking differently and maybe us all advocating the council as a great place to work because of the opportunities that are available. And I think there's a role there for members to assist us with there as well, almost a call to action. You know, the way that we talk about the council, the reputation that it builds, you know, it's a great employer. The grass isn't always greener, but I don't think we necessarily sell it and explain that to individuals. And I think the other aspect is that where we're doing the careers fairs now, John Forsey, he was at a recent career fair, and my son came home and said, "Oh, Mum, I'm going to be okay with school because I'm going to work for the council." I said, "Are you? What are you going to do?" Well, so I met John Forsey at a career fair, and he said that if I do mechanics, actually, when I leave school, then I can apply to be an apprenticeship for an apprentice. I'm going to be an apprentice fitter. So, you know, I mean, whether that comes off or not is another thing, but he's already thinking that. So it might be that the career fairs today are actually securing our workforce in 2 to 3 years' time. And so I think we've got to think about that the short-term quick wins as well as that medium, longer-term aspect. So I just wanted to raise those
Emma,
points.
you've raised a really important point there, and I've actually I've got it highlighted and underlined on my notebook here because I was going to ask Gemma. It's all very well sort of going into college or university when people have completed their studies and then obviously trying to match a career to them. But that very point of our year 9s and our year 11s who don't know what they want to do, and that's the vast majority of them really, isn't it? I was going to ask how we're promoting. So what you're saying is through careers fairs, Powys attend?
Absolutely. And there's been some really successful ones. I think Newtown and Brecon in particular, Gemma, where there was a hive of activity where a number of our different departments were engaged with MPTC and others, and you know, health with the other organisations. I don't know the true extent personally. I happened to arrive at the one in Brecon and just get a feel for the energy and the buzz and the positivity, but actually it's around continuing that. And I think there's more that we can do as an organisation to sell and change the reputation in terms of a good place to work.
And I think also anecdotally from the young people I know, there is now a questioning of whether university is the right route. At one time, we were all perhaps a little bit guilty of the snobbery around, oh, what's your daughter doing? Oh, she's going to university. Well done. What's your daughter doing? She's going to college. Oh, well, there was a little bit of that, let's be honest. And I think we've downsold the value of quality trades, which are highly skilled, but because not necessarily degree level, we've dumbed them down as being less than. And I think it is really important that our young people understand there's no such thing as less than. It's quality of work, isn't it, in the field?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the other aspect is, if you think about the debt, I mean, there are different opportunities. Well, also, for different
Emma,
people.
it's not just the debt; it's the quality of student life has changed dramatically from pre-COVID days. So the university experience is a very different thing now. So maybe we can be tapping into that with our young people and letting them know, well, you know, you can do this, and you can train, and you can get paid, and you can still have your social life with your friends at home, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Thank you for that. So I'm going to bring in Gary now because he's been super patient with his hand up. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, morning all. Yeah, thanks, Gemma, for the presentation. It's really encouraging to see that sort of change of tact is bringing some improvements in some areas or many areas, which is really positive. But obviously, like you, I'm sure I'm worried about the social care sector, and I just thinking about what Peter said about sort of following our young people, but actually also looking at that the other way, in my opinion. Let's not just try and keep and attract our own young people. Let's look at who's out there that we can attract into Powys that knows nothing about Powys. So I guess it's just perhaps more of a comment, but about let's look at where the colleges, the universities and the training settings are doing social care work, and let's heavily invest in resources in getting out to reach those, to communicate with them. Obviously, we're blessed in, let's say, the likes of Newtown. You have a care setting training provider in a town, and you would hope through that you churn out some students that look for work at some point or go on to further higher education. But I wonder how targeted we do that. You said you've got Manchester on your sites already for it. Sounds like a specific careers fair. That sounds really good. But I sort of think we need to broaden that out to the best of our ability. And I know it's quite a commitment to attend these fairs out of area, but let's not just look at our own potential recruits, if you like. I think we've got to broaden that out because that sector is such a challenging sector still to recruit for. And it's going to be an issue for a while. And I think we've got to do that young investment in them, or the early investment interventions with them to bring them in. And then I guess just as a thought, how much effort do we put in as an authority and members even about making sure that any of the big events that our county hosts, we're there promoting not just Powys in general, but they're promoting our careers fair. So I don't know if we were at the Hay Festival, for instance, is Powys going to attend? Obviously, we've got a building at the Royal Welsh. So I don't know what the programme is yet, but we should be there promoting recruitment, not just all the good things that we think we're able to do. So almost get out of our building, get a stand on one of the big thoroughfares and say, look, come and have a job with us. There's a huge audience, still the largest agricultural show in Europe. And I sort of just hope we're not missing a trick on those, really. Thank you.
We have been having those discussions in the recruitment sprint, Councillor Gary, about the Royal Welsh Show and other shows that we might be able to attend. Exactly that, because the data that we're gathering, the evidence of all the work we've been doing is that it's exactly that. You have to go out there and you have to promote and you've got to be proactive. And yeah, where we've got opportunities, we need to be capitalising on them as much as possible. And going back to the social worker point as well, I know that the teams in social care workforce, they have been looking around how they're engaging with universities and those who are leaving, and potentially offering placements so that when people come with us, they enjoy working with us, and then you can provisionally offer them something, you know, when they qualify as well. So yes, I think you're right. We do need to think creatively about how we attract people to us at all different stages.
Okay, Councillor Gary, your hand is still up. So did you have a secondary question? No. I'm going to bring Councillor Sarah. Well, you've got your hand up. Was it on this point, Sarah?
Yeah, I've just done a quick look myself. I don't know whether I'm looking in the right place, but on the website, when you go into apprenticeships, it's joining a pool of apprentices. So there's not, it doesn't actually show. I can't find anywhere. I did a quick scan through the job vacancies, and I can't see apprenticeships being listed on the vacancies. They may be there, and I haven't seen them, but I just think it's a bit, I think the apprentices should be shown. Why, you know, I don't think they should have to join a pool. Rather, you know, they should be applying for something rather than sort of casting a net that something might come up, as it were. And I don't know what the apprenticeship rates are as well. Are we showing them anywhere?
Yeah, so the rates of the real living wage, so those should be on all of the adverts. We've done quite a bit of promotional work around the apprenticeships just to highlight that. The pool is a way of, as well, of us engaging with the talent pool. So they will outline what areas they might be interested in, but then as soon as a vacancy comes up, we then promote it to them so they get to see that firsthand. I'll take away around the apprenticeships on the website. It could be that those other three have just recently closed, but I will check. I'll take that away just to make sure that they are being highlighted.
Okay, so what's the annual salary for an apprentice?
It's £10.90 an hour, so I think it works out at around about 21, 22 annual salary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Emma.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sarah. Those points well made in terms of showing the roles around apprenticeships. It is around 21,000, which is much better than the level that we have to put in place, which is why we're starting to see the interest in not just a younger generation, but maybe some people that this now offers the opportunity to change career. I just wanted to come back on Councillor Gary's point, if I may, Chair. I think the points around Royal Welsh and Hay Festival, etc., and really having a presence there are good suggestions. And so we can engage with Diane Reynolds and her team around the Royal Welsh, because that's with us in the coming weeks. But actually the social care sector, and that proving to be the challenging area for recruitment, it's actually our external recruitment hasn't been as successful as our grow our own. So the social services team themselves, working with Gemma and others have been really successful in the grow your own aspect. They're also offering over 20 placements to students, so that's beyond our grow our own. That'll be students that are in universities or colleges. So Councillor Gary, I think your points are really well made, and you know, there was a day where those placements weren't being offered, whereas now 20 plus, I think, to the point where they can't offer any more, in the hope that when people come to Powys they can see how they're nurtured and supported, and that it is a great place, and hopefully in time will look to work for us. Of course, those that were our new recruits or newly developed and newly qualified social workers sort of 2-3 years ago, before we know it, will become our experienced social workers, particularly in children's services. We don't seem to see, and this on a national level, social workers stay in that sector for too long a period. We've also got a joint workforce futures board that we're resetting and looking at what can we do across health and social care in respect of this sector. How do we support, what are the kind of roles and joint roles we need to support the transformation developments that are needed in social services. So I haven't got the answers to that at the moment, but that's work that's underway. And actually, the one area that social services are really pushing for, particularly in children's, is this trial around a 4-day week, and that's a 4-day week out of 7, which is very different to working your Monday 9 till 5 and then you're out of hours aspect. So, I mean, that's going to be really interesting, and something I think that the Scrutiny Committee will be particularly interested in working with us, because we need to see the benefits. Gemma hasn't touched upon this, so if I may, Gemma and Paul have joined a national group with WLGA. We've also been reaching out to, I think is it South Cambridgeshire, Gemma,
Yes,
who
yeah.
have had a pilot, and in terms of local government sector. So I think this is going to be quite interesting. We're hoping to bring a paper before Cabinet and yourselves fairly soon, whereby we consider that and then running the pilot to see what the benefits are. Working with the head of Children's Services, Sharon Powell, she's saying let's try it in the hardest team first, and if we can get it to work in there, then actually we, you know, hopefully we'll see the benefits of that and can roll out wider. So that's quite exciting, and something for us to trial, and that's a way of us just trying to be creative and innovative, of doing something different, which actually Sharon's view is if we can do something like that in Powys, we'll probably have a lot more people knocking our door and be able to recruit externally experienced workers into the team, which then the benefits around that means we reduce our agency, we get greater continuity for actually the children and young people. In particular, they get to know their social worker, they've got the same individual, and if we can marry that up at the same time as doing the residential placements in county, so our social workers are travelling less to do the reviews, etc., then it's all these different pieces coming together that could actually move us to a more sustainable service, and understanding how those pieces really complement one another. So I just wanted to add those points, Chair, that haven't been touched on yet. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Emma. Councillor Glynn.
Sorry, just one last question, which, pardon me. Sorry, I'm picking up a further point. A lot was made of the careers fairs and engaging with young people. I'm just trying to cast my mind back to my time in school, and I remember we had direct engagement with the army and I think the police, who came and talked to us at assemblies. Now, clearly, I came back to work for Powys in a different guise, and I know lots of my peers did as well, but it just strikes me as kind of peculiar that we're not actually going directly in, doing those kind of presentations directly to those 16-year-olds, those school leavers. So I'm just wondering if that's happening now as well.
Yeah, there is some of that taking place. Mark, who manages our apprenticeship pool, he's been going out to various different schools, and some of those events are jointly with PTHB. So we need to probably upsize that a little bit, so that we're doing a little bit more of it and going in at the right stages, so that we're highlighting what those opportunities are. But yes, there is some work around that, but I think there's some further work and promotion that we can do around that as well, to make sure we're reaching more schools.
Great, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. Gemma, can I just ask about the exit interviews? So I take it that that's not something new. It's probably been going on for years. Well, it's normal in any business, really. Is there any stats showing that some of the higher end executive jobs, people are moving out of the county?
We haven't found that in the analysis, but to be honest, part of the issue is that we're not getting much of a response rate for our exit process, which is why we're reviewing it. So there's a bit of inconsistency across services as well in terms of what we're asking. So this review now is about being clear, what information do we want to gather from those levers, and how do we make sure that we get a better response rate for that in terms of interviews. It's been traditionally the last couple of years more of a questionnaire approach. So, and generally people, unless they've got something specific that they want to say, generally don't complete that. So it's exactly that we need to try and understand what is it that we want to find out from that process, and what do we need to put in place to ensure that we gather that information and do something about it, that there's some kind of follow-up from that then as well.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add further to that, then you did the Y Powys review. And that was of current staff, not necessarily leavers. Were there any interesting or surprising comments made in that?
Not really. There was some really valuable, I can circulate a summary of that if that would be helpful after the meeting, that highlighted some of the key points. But a lot of it was very positive, particularly around the flexibility element. But yes, there are some areas then for us to work on, but it was very specific as well. So some areas there are specific challenges maybe around rotas or something, but generally the survey was quite positive overall, which was quite encouraging. But yes, I'm happy to circulate that.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma. That'd be interesting. Councillor Carl.
Thank you, Chair. As someone who's been through an apprenticeship, I'm going into my 27th year in my
Get the hang of it soon, Carl.
Type in for me soon, yeah. As an electrician, I know that once I finished the basic training, which took about 3 to 4 years to do, I was quite hot property, if you like. There was a lot of companies after me because there isn't many of us about. And I just want to know what Powys is going to do once we train these apprenticeships, whether it be plumbing, electrical, carpentry, whatever it may be. Once they're trained up, obviously the private sector is going to come knocking for these people. What are we doing in the long term to retain them? I know that we heard at the start that you're doing surveys and what have you, how you're getting on in the workplace, are you thinking about leaving them, etc., etc. But what we doing hard and fast with regards to remuneration, because obviously the private sector is going to offer more. So what we're doing around that, or going to be doing around that.
I think this comes under our whole people strategy, which looks at that whole employee journey and also around retention, and remuneration is a part of that, but also reward in general, which might not necessarily just be remuneration either. There are other elements that people want and will stay with us for other reward. So we need to look at our whole benefits kind of package that we offer. And also in doing that, we need to be going out to staff just to make sure and check in that what we think they value, they do actually value. So, you know, the pension is a big one, of course, but for some they might not be worried about the pension, but perhaps that's because they don't understand it a little bit. So there's a piece of work around engagement that we really ensure that people really understand the benefits that we've got around some of those family friendly policies, our sickness absence procedures and policies, and remuneration and paid leave for people for a period of time. But yeah, so that'll be a big part of the people strategy work now, is around that reward and retention and remuneration that we need to look at.
Yeah, I think that would be attractive to someone in their 30s and 40s, but Councillor Glynn could probably speak better on this. Someone in their 20s, you know I can remember back to me being in my 20s as an apprentice. All I wanted to know is when I get my next pay rise, and how much overtime I'm going to have this week, and could I work a Saturday morning to get a bit extra. So I think it comes down to the hourly rate or the salary that you're going to pay these people post qualification. And obviously being in the electrical world, you can go on forever with training. You can do 7-8 years if you want to. it's endless. So going back to that, I just think that we need to be mindful of what we're offering people going forward. So
yeah, and it's that market analysis as well, isn't it? So that we really understand who our competitors are and what they're offering, so that we are able to be competitive in that market, as well as understanding what it is that people value and what they want.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
From those comments, could I make the assumption then that other businesses, industry in the area consider the training provided by Powys to be of quality? So if other companies are looking to poach, if you were, our newly trained recruits, can we take that as a compliment to mean that the quality of the training is good? Do we know? Do we have any sort of
Can I
data
come
on
in?
that?
I think if we look at some of our levers and where those individuals have gone on to, I think is testament actually to the training and the opportunities that we have provided people. They've gone on to very good roles, and so I think that in itself, anecdotally, you know, that in itself.
Yeah, so is there some way we could use that information to say you're not just getting trained, you're getting, you know, this isn't just cake, this is M&S cake kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know, if our employees are highly sought after outside of the council, then the council must be doing something really well that needs promoting to people. Don't just be a tradesperson, be a Powys County Council trained tradesperson.
I think, yeah, absolutely, and I think there is quite a challenge, isn't there, with as well in terms of what people want. Carl, Councillor Carl, I've got a 20-year-old now in trades who, yeah, thinks very similar to how you referred to your thinking back in the day, and you know, and it's at a different time, isn't it? What's right for someone in the 20s may be different by the time they're thinking about family, etc. Maybe in their 30s, 40s, and I think one of the things that we're going to have a real struggle with as an organisation is how we do compare salary with the private element. And I think, you know, the reality is, and sorry to bring a bit of maybe doom and gloom on this, is that if we pay more, how do we balance that off with the budget that we've got in terms of the financial envelope that's available? I'm not saying that we can't, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, or didn't. We just got to work it through logistically across the whole piece, because actually sometimes it's actually cheaper to pay more than it is to bring in agency. Other times it's cheaper to continue to pay what we currently pay and sometimes bring in the agency. And I think, you know, we just got to work through that cost benefit analysis. But actually the cost is really turnover, onboarding. That's a hidden cost within recruitment, because the time it takes, that knowledge management that you lose if you've got people here for certain periods. And I think if we look at our workforce, I can't remember the figures off the top of my head, Jem, you might have a better idea, but, you know, we've got a significant cohort of people, you know, high percentage, I think, in their 50s plus, and greater in the 60 plus. And if you think about, and then the number of those that have actually worked for the authority for 20 years plus, all of a sudden you've got this knowledge that's starting to move through the organisation and eventually won't be in the organisation, and the new element coming in. So we've got to think about that as well in terms of knowledge management, so we don't just lose all of it.
And it's that succession plan as well, isn't it? You know, I don't have the figures to hand, but it is around being prepared for that. So once we've got the data, we're more likely to predict when that's going to happen, so we can be prepared for it and ensure then that we've got that talent that's coming through that pipeline to fill that gap.
Yeah, exactly. Councillor Carl, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, the reason why I highlight it is because in the private sector, you've obviously, in my discipline of electrical world, you've got domestic, commercial, industrial. Obviously, the commercial industrial side pay more, but we all know within our trade how much everyone is charging. So to try and poach an apprentice off another company is very difficult, because we're all paying around the same sort of mark. Whereas if I was looking for someone who's just qualified, I would be looking very closely to Powys County Council because I know I'd be able to outgun them on the monetary side of things and pay more per hour to attract someone over to me. So that's the reason why I highlight it.
The only thing I wondered after that then, so with our apprenticeship, our trade apprenticeships, is there a tie-in so that once they've completed their training, they have to continue working for the council for a period of time? I think there is with graduate trainees, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is anything specific with the but
No.
it's certainly something that we could look at, yeah, particularly where we're providing and investing in that training.
Yeah, it might be worth it. Okay, no more hands up for the moment. The only other question that I wanted to ask is, do we know how many vacancies we have across the whole council?
Yes, funny enough, this is going to be one of our measures that we'll be reporting on around vacancies. It's a bit of a challenge to get that from the system because there will be some vacancies that are on the system and they're vacant for a very good reason. So somebody might have gone on maternity leave and they've used that money in a different way to cover that role for a period of time. So we're going to be drawing on the vacancies that are actually live and out so that we know that that's a true, accurate reflection. That varies. We're publicising some of that, but it can vary. It's usually round about the 100 mark a month, or at any one time we've got vacancies ongoing. Some of those will be for multiple posts, for example. So our reablement and support worker roles might be one post, but there might be 20 positions that kind of sit behind that we're looking to recruit to. But certainly we're going to be doing a bit more work around that so that we can really analyse that we do see a reduction in those vacancies that require filling. So that's part of the work, and that's one of the measures we're going to be using so that we can measure the success of some of the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Liz, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Gemma. When I looked at the report earlier, I did think, particularly with the social worker vacancies, because clearly there'd been a recruitment campaign and none had been recruited. And I did think it would really enhance the report if you could see actually how many vacancies there were and how many of those vacancies were being filled by agency, so it gives a sense of what the issues are, because obviously with qualified social workers, it does present issues in terms of child protection and adult protection. And then the other point I just wanted to raise is just really a compliment for Emma, because I think that summary, Emma, of your entry into the service and the sort of progression, I think that is a wonderfully kind of motivating story. And I think, if more stories are told like that, particularly at fairs, I mean, I'm sure they probably are, and it's probably something that you've done. But, I just think it's a great way of encouraging young people to come into the service and to, to benefit, because we could be losing quite a lot of people who don't see, what the future is. And I know I'm probably repeating what people have said, because I think that's the general theme of this, the comments that we've had, is that, this is a good authority to work for, but it's just actually getting people through the door and keeping them. So thank you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you, Liz. So I've got no more hands up. I'll just go around the room to check that everybody's had their chance or their questions been raised. So Councillor Coroner, did you have any further comments? Do you feel all your questions and queries were answered?
Well, I mean, I've been interested in the Grow Your Own, both for the Teaching Health Board and the social workers, because I thought that this year you had 5 graduates. That so it is working. I don't know how the mechanisms. That was about it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Ardwell. Are you happy?
Yeah, no, fine, Chair. Yeah, all the big issues are being covered, and good presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Gemma. And thank you, Emma. That was an excellent presentation, excellent report. And I was particularly interested in seeing the recruitment campaigns, because they showed us very visually, didn't it, what you've been doing, what the results of those were, and really highlighted where those challenges were in the social care and residential care working roles. But it also really highlighted all the successes. And that must be really very rewarding for you, knowing that all the hard work you put in is starting to pay off. Obviously, it goes without saying there's still challenges ahead, but I applaud you for that. So thank you very much. And Emma, you've just put your hand up again. So
if I may, just to close, yeah, just to say, you know, the team have worked really hard, but we're working with the services. So it has been a whole team approach. And I think that's important. But I just want to say thank you to the Scrutiny. You've raised a number of things this morning, and I've put a number of asterisks against points that we can take away and will feed into our ongoing work. So one is about that wider market comparison. The other is around the graduates, the qualifications and bursary element that we touched upon, the women in HTR. We also picked up the element around tracking youngsters, where they go and how we can reach out in time. That apprenticeships should be shown, so easier access. So rather than just the talent pool, we can be able to see which jobs we've got currently that are apprenticeships. The upsizing our in reach more in schools, picking up on Councillor Glynn's point around other agencies that have done so. I know we've picked up on the work, and that's in train around the exit interviews. So picking up on Councillor Adrian's point around, you know, we haven't been able to do as much analysis as we want. We need to review the process around that. The knowledge management succession planning, the apprenticeship tie-in, and also about more stories of working for PCC. On apologies, and Councillor Gary as well, in terms of that utilising the big festivals that are available to us, so that we can actually reach out to people beyond Powys that are already in Powys in terms of the place. So actually from my perspective, and in terms of giving us a steer to the work, it's been really, really helpful, and I'm really grateful, and just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Excellent. So thank you all. Okay, so we'll move on now to item 7 on our agenda, which is the climate overview. And we have Tim Yeo here to present for us. He is Programme Delivery Manager for Climate and Nature. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members. I'll just share my screen. Please let me know when you can see that.
Yep, we can see that. Thank you.
Okay. I do know I've got a number of slides to go through, and you have items on after me. So, Chair, do push me along if I need it, or bring me to a stop if you wish to. So, I wanted to start by giving by saying that the impacts of climate change are quite severe, or can be quite severe. So that can range from hotter, drier summers, warmer, wetter winters, more extreme weather events, and sea and water level changes. There's a number of ways that we can address this through mitigation, so direct action to reduce our carbon emissions, which would then reduce the warming of the earth, or through adaptation, which is where we know that we can't reduce the impacts, looking at ways that we can try and mitigate or reduce the severity of those impacts, such as flooding. In terms of the cause of climate change, that is levels of greenhouse gases, and over the last half century, the average temperature of the planet has risen as a consequence of that. An increase in temperature does lead to far-ranging implications, and they are very damaging to the environment, nature, and for us as humans. So in 2017, the UK climate change risk assessment was undertaken, and it showed that in Britain the temperature was 1% higher, and sea levels were rising 3 millimeters each year, which doesn't sound significant, but if you consider the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they stated that insects which are vital for pollination for our crops and plants will lose half their habitats, following an increase of 1.5% in temperature. So that obviously has a significant impact on our ability to grow food and sustain ourselves as a race. In terms of biodiversity, in 2019, the State of the Nature report was undertaken in Wales, and estimated 1 in 6 species are at risk of extinction in Wales. And since monsoons began in 1970, 73 species have already gone extinct, with a further 666 threatening with extinction. The report was undertaken in 2020 again, and it showed that species and habitats are in serious decline of resilience of our ecosystem. And biodiversity really is the life support system for all living organisms, humans, and it's essential to our economic, social, and environmental well-being. So a decline of biodiversity really is quite significant for us. There's a number of key pressures contributing to biodiversity loss in Wales. That's climate change, invasive species, pollution, woodland management, intensive agriculture. There's quite a few impacts. I want to give you an overview of how the national to local picture aligns and joins together. So I've pulled this slide together for you, and I won't go into detail, but I'll pick one instance out and show you how it links from national to local. So on the top line, we have the Future Energy Grids for Wales project. That's a project that is driven by Welsh Government, working with National Grid, Ofgem, our distribution network operators, so SPEN, WPD, the gas network operators, Wales and West Utilities, and also engaging with UK government. And that project is looking at what the current energy systems are in Wales and what the energy systems need to look like to be net zero ready. That then feeds down into the regional work, which is the Mid Wales Energy Strategy and Action Plan. So that was commissioned by Welsh Government to look at the Mid Wales region as a whole, to understand our energy system, and to identify priority areas and actions that we need to take forward to feed up into the Future Energy Wales project, but also to feed down into local action on the ground. And then that leads through to the local area energy plans, which are currently underway, which then takes that strategic level piece at the regional and national level and really looks at that local element. So at a per settlement basis, what the energy system needs to look like at each of those levels. So that's just one instance of how national runs through to local, and it is a two-way process. It isn't just top down. It is from our local ability to influence regional and national work, and we are doing that through a number of consultations and working groups to inform and drive policy direction at Welsh Government level. In terms of Welsh Government, they set in 2017 an ambition of achieving net zero public sector by 2030. They became the first government to declare a climate emergency in 2019, and they were one of the first in 2021 to declare a nature emergency declaration. There's a number of key nature and climate policies at the Welsh level, so Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, the Environmental Wales Act, particularly Section 6, which is a duty for local authorities and public sector, Prosperity for All, a low carbon Wales, Net Zero Wales, so and the Nature Recovery Action Plan for Wales. So there's a number of key documents which are at a national level that we have to consider and implement at a regional and local level. The Nature Recovery Action Plan for Wales, this is the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, and it really sets the scene for everyone to take action and support the integration of biodiversity into decision making across Welsh Government and local delivery through area statements. We have the Prosperity for All, a low carbon Wales. This was the first document that Welsh Government produced after they declared a climate emergency. and it really sets the route map for decarbonisation across the Welsh public sector, and really frames the public sector 2030 target. I think this had 100 policies, and it set the carbon budget for 2016 through to 2020. In 2021, the second carbon budget document was released, which is Net Zero Wales, Carbon Budget 2. And this works from 21 to 25, and it increased the number of policies in the document by 20, so around 120, I believe, but it increased the pace and expectation and ambitions of Wales to reach that 2030 target for the public sector in 2050 beyond. So we know that there's a public sector 2030 target. As a council, we're with all our local authorities in Wales and other public sector partners, we are working towards being net zero by 2030. That causes a number of challenges, which I'll touch upon in the next few slides. In terms of how we report to Welsh Government that we're making progress, we undertake carbon accounts. So they provide us with an overview of the carbon footprint and emissions across the council's assets and operations. This allows us to find areas within the highest emissions and target our action to monitor progress or monitor how we take the most effective action to reduce our carbon emissions through our climate action plans. In terms of how we calculate the carbon emissions, I say it's quite simple. The spreadsheet behind it is very detailed, but for example, we take, say, 20 litres of fuel, whether that's diesel or petrol. We then use an emission factor, which is taken from DEFRA, I believe, UK government DEFRA figures. That gives an emission factor for petrol, which could be 0.5 kilograms of CO2. So therefore, if you take 20 litres times it by 0.5, that gives you 10 kilograms of carbon emissions. In terms of our breakdown of carbon accounts, this is the breakdown for 21-22, so last year, and you'll see there's certain areas that are slightly bigger than others. It's a bit difficult once you get into the detail underneath the graphs like this, that the figures do start to identify areas where we have a bit more ability to influence than others, and some of those ability to influence areas might be in some of the smaller sections, but you'll see the supply chain element is certainly the largest element of that in our carbon emissions. In terms of emission scopes, we work across scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1 being the fuel, our assets essentially, our buildings, our vehicles, and the fuel that they use and consume. Scope 2 is the energy that we buy from others, and there are emissions around how that's produced, how it's transported, how it's actually brought to the buildings and vehicles that we use. And then scope 3, which is our supply chains, any products we buy, any goods, any services, that's all covered within scope 3. So when we look at the breakdown of scope 1, 2, and 3, it very much mirrors the last graph, really, in terms of scope 3, which is our supply chain, is by far our largest, 78.5%. And scope 1 and 2 equate to about 21.5. I'm not very good at maths, but essentially that's the element that scope 3 is harder to influence because we have to work with our supply chains. There's less ability for us to directly influence the supply chain. Scope 1 and 2 are more within our control, so we have more direct ability to decarbonize our buildings, to look at our vehicles and move them away from fossil fuels. So there is a lot of work undergoing in scope 3 to understand where our carbon per spend is, to understand where our highest emitting contracts are, and to work with services to try and improve the contract management process so that when we're procuring new services, we're factoring in front end the climate and nature impacts, but also those ongoing contracts, how we're working with suppliers to ensure that they have net zero plans in place, to ensure that they're looking to reduce their carbon emissions, and to also look to work with local suppliers to improve their ability to win contracts as well. So how the council is responding: we declared a climate emergency in 2020, and we declared a nature and biodiversity emergency in 2022. The Audit General Wales did a report across the public sector looking at the readiness for net zero carbon by 2030. The outcomes of this were, I don't think are going to shock anyone really, in terms of there's a sense that everyone's struggling to deliver to that target, and that's through a number of reasons. Essentially, that's through leadership and demonstration of the ability to effectively collaborate and deliver, the strategic direction and pace of implementation not being where it needs to be. That we need to understand the costs involved with this, because they are quite large, and public sector budgets are constrained as they are. There is a skills gap, and there needs to be an increased capacity, knowledge and awareness across the organisations. And there also needs to be better data quality monitoring to support decision making. The carbon accounts process by Welsh Government isn't perfect. They know that, everyone in the public sector knows that, but we need to, where possible, improve the quality of the data as much as possible so we can make the right decisions and prioritise funding in the areas that are going to have the most value. We had a plan undertaken, a risk assessment, undertaken on Paris County Council in 21-22, which was issued at the start of this year. And again, this is quite similar to other outcomes of reports for other local authorities that said, essentially, we have a good understanding of the agenda. We have structures in place to develop and manage activity, but we need to work towards a costed action plan. And we need to understand how we deliver that action plan. So that's work that we're undertaking and is a priority for the Climate and Nature Programme Board, but it does come with a number of challenges, which I think is consistent across the public sector from conversations I'm having with other local authorities across Wales. It's a bit of a finger in the air in terms of costing some of these elements at this moment in time, and we need to work towards improving that and get some more certainty. So again, one of the main recommendations is that we need to work towards costed action plans, and then we need to ensure it's aligned to the medium-term financial strategy. So once we have a better costed action plan, we will then work with Jane Thomas to understand how that aligns with our MTFS, and where we don't have the funding, which will absolutely be the case, identifying areas that we can try and draw down funding from multiple sources to enable us to deliver towards 2030. Our corporate strategy, Stronger, Fairer, Greener, quite clearly identifies that the council is taking this extremely seriously, and we're working towards we want to be an organisation that considers climate and nature impacts, well-being, and also works with residents and communities to ensure that we're all working towards improved outcomes in both those areas. We have a transformation portfolio as a council, and this year we strengthened again the importance around climate and nature by having a climate and nature programme added to that, and that has a dual role. The first being working towards that 2030 target and ensuring that we're delivering the climate and nature emergency declarations, but also to work across the portfolio and across the organisation to embed embed strong and robust governance, to embed awareness, learning, and also this consideration of climate and nature impacts in decision making and in the services that we deliver. So a dual role for the programme there, but it is also a corporate responsibility as well through our Stronger, Fairer, Greener corporate plan. The Climate Nature programme has a number of different work streams. So we have energy, so looking at how we reduce energy demand, increasing on-site generation through solar, exploring renewable energy opportunities, whether that's looking at our land or our partners' assets, land, to see if we can look at things like solar farms to produce energy locally. That also links into the Mid Wales Energy Strategy and local area energy plan work that's ongoing. We have a PSB climate wellbeing plan, and PSB partners are looking to take a territorial approach to work together to look at ways that we can support communities and support the county to become net zero quicker. The carbon accounting, it's not perfect, but it's the best we have. So we're doing a lot of work to improve clarity of information to inform prioritise actions and decision making. We have climate action plans across building and land, mobility and transport, procurement and governance. They're in a working state. They do need to improve, and they do need to work towards identifying the carbon emission savings and the costings. Behavioural change is a massive element. We need to communicate both internally and externally, and we need to improve the communications and engagement as well. The content on our corporate website isn't good enough. The content on our corporate intranet site for internal staff isn't good enough, but there's an element under the governance action plan where we'll be looking at improving that. We also need to embed climate and nature into the heart of the Powys County Council, and through our Section 6 duty, we have a Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan and partnership who are doing some fantastic work towards that end. Only a few slides left now, Chair. The governance arrangements are working in progress, but we do have governance in place, and we are continuing to strengthen that. So that runs from Cabinet all the way down to a number of officer groups or officer and member groups looking at specific elements. There's this scrutiny committee, which will play a valuable role in the work moving forward to ensure that you're challenging us, but you're also supporting us to move forward. There's a number of working groups across each of the areas which inform the action plans and support the development of improved action plans. And then we have a nature stakeholder group, which is part of the Nature Partnership and works with groups and external stakeholders. We're looking to set up a climate one in the coming months, so that we're also engaging with people externally. It's not just an internal facing challenge. In terms of the programme risks, they're very much similar to the AGW report outcomes. Financial resources, capital and revenue to develop the programme of work and associated projects to get us to net zero. That is a massive issue. That is a massive challenge. The council's budget needs to ensure that we still continue to deliver vital services to our residents and communities, and how we weigh that up with the costs that we need to make to get towards net zero is something that we need to consider in detail. The officer resource capacity and expertise at all levels of the organisation are lacking, and that's not just Powys County Council, that's all local authorities in Wales and all public sector organisations. But we need to work with officers, with members, to improve that level of understanding, that knowledge, through things like corporate training, through additional awareness and guidance and support. And we do have a green network for officers now, which brings together anyone interested in climate and nature. They can attend that, and we hold presentations, we talk through topics, and that's all with the view of trying to raise awareness and raise interest in the subject areas. The council's transition away from fossil fuels is going to be hampered by grid infrastructure in Mid Wales. That's well known. It's a well-known issue. There is a reputational risk around we declare climate and nature emergencies. There's an expectation we will deliver. If we don't, that's going to have impacts on us. And on the current trajectory, we're not likely to achieve net zero by 2030. Again, I think that's a challenge for the whole public sector across Wales, not just Powys County Council. So very quickly, the last couple of slides in terms of the key nature and emergency strategies and plans in Powys. You'll know we have a climate change strategy, which sets out the net zero council by 2030. And it does link into those action plans I mentioned before: buildings and land, mobility and transport, which you'll be looking through in more detail after this, procurement and governance. We have the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan. So this is in response to the Section 6 duty of the Environmental Wales Act 2016. And as a local authority, public authority, we need to adhere to that Section 6 and embed consideration of biodiversity and ecosystems into our thinking early, into our planning, policies and programmes and projects. And it takes 6 objectives from the national Wales level plan and then considers them in a local context and then works with partners through the partnership to meet those objectives. And then finally, the Mid Wales Energy Strategy, just pulling out the key priorities for you there. It focuses on how we decarbonise our housing stock and transport, how we work with national level to drive strategic investment in the grid, how we look at improving renewable energy generation and storage to improve energy security across the UK, and then how innovation plays a part in that delivery. So thank you very much for listening. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much for that. That was a very in-depth presentation, and you may be able to see on your screen the hands are going up here. I'm going to ask you, Tom, if at all possible, can you turn your camera on? It's always nice to put a face to the voice. And the first questioner here is Councillor Carl. Thank you, Tom. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether Tom wants to answer this, or Matt, or Councillor Jackie. Obviously, moving forward, we're going to be moving away from fossil fuels with our fleets over to EV, probably. I think we're at the crossroads now where we could change a little bit of direction. Obviously, batteries are made of cobalt and lithium, and they are extremely damaging to the environment. We have an opportunity here to maybe move over to hydrogen and invest in our wind farms and have a bit of a buy-in there with Powys County Council into wind farms that are being constructed, and have our own plants where we're producing hydrogen or sharing that. So I'm just wondering, Tom or Matt or Councillor Jackie, are you thinking about that at all, or are you purely looking at EV? Because as has been pointed out in the slides, I can tell you now, I subcontract to a company where we're trying to put a number of megawatts onto the grid, and we can't. There's no capacity there. So I just want to know what the long-term plans are. Hydrogen for me would be a quicker way of trying to achieve net zero targets for 2030. Or are you thinking about a mixture? Because if you're trying to get everyone outside of Powys onto the grid, it's going to be impossible. I would say it's impossible to charge all the fleet vehicles we got currently on the grid.
I'm happy to start the ball rolling on that one, Chair. I think at this moment in time, Councillor Lewis, I think we have to consider all options on the table. I think the battery electric vehicle market is changing, and batteries are being developed and adopted now which don't actually have cobalt in them, such as LFP batteries or lithium iron phosphate batteries. So it is absolutely an issue. We need to ensure that it is a just transition, and we are transitioning towards net zero, and not over mining for valuable minerals and resources elsewhere. I think in terms of the grid, it is an issue, and it will hamper our ability to decarbonise heating and transport. That is something that we need to be lobbying to Welsh Government to make them aware, or increase their awareness of the challenges we face. I think in terms of our vehicles, we need to identify the best options for each vehicle, the best uses of those vehicles, and then understand what the best low carbon alternative is. Some of that may be electric vehicles, but we are also exploring some alternative options, which I think Matt will maybe cover in his action plan section, but he might want to pick up now.
Yeah, if that's all right, Chair.
Yeah, please do come in.
As Councillor Carl said, absolutely hit the nail on the head. We are at that crossroads. We've got a transition plan. I'm pretty sure John's on the call, or due to come on the call, but we've got a transition plan now for the next 7 years in terms of what our vehicles need to change. But we do need to look at what we do here and now, because as you write, the infrastructure is not there. When we go through the mobility and transport action plan, you'll see that infrastructure is one of our actions in terms of, particularly where we've got a sort of large goods vehicles for waste and recycling at Abermule and Brecon. But we met with a company last week to look at other alternatives, but some of the short-term solutions will be costly, and I think that's why it's key, particularly in our plan, that we cost it up, just give you the facts as it is, and then obviously see the CO2 reductions. But personally, I think it's going to have to be a bit of an hybrid between electric. Hydrogen's got his part for the larger vehicles, and then what we do in the short term, so as in the next sort of 3 to 4 years, to give us that transition and start reducing our CO2 then.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Cole. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Tom and all, for giving a really detailed presentation. I've picked out quite a lot because there was a lot in there, so perhaps I'll just go through a couple and then allow others to come in, and I'm sure they'll be asked. Quite clear, Tom, from there that Scope 3 is the biggest challenge and by far the biggest contributor and polluter, if you like. So I guess I'm just sort of making a point that we can't shy away from that. I understand it's easy to do. Well, Scope 1 is relatively easy. We can clock where we are and we can make some minor adjustments, but at 78%, Scope 3 is going to be the one that we're really going to have to tackle. And I guess my argument is we need to try to start to tackle that sooner rather than later. And I know the teams are, but if we looked at procurement as a current interim, let's say, issue, we're on our third procurement team leader now in the 1 year I've been here within Powys. And that churn of people, you sort of lose that expertise. I know one has been sucked up into Caerphilly's national procurement framework system. That's great. That's a really positive step that we talked about. We're promoting people's internal skills, but then they get good at their job and effectively seconded by Welsh Government. And if we have to continually deal with that sort of churn, it's really hard to pick up those skills quickly enough to make the impact that we need. We've got 6.5 years to try and reduce our impact and ideally meet that target that we're sort of clearly saying that we're going to struggle to do. So looking at Scope 3, in my opinion, is got to be critical, and we've got to do that sooner rather than later. And I know it's the big one to tackle and it's really hard, and I know other local authorities are really struggling with it, and perhaps some of the methodology is challenging. But the more that we support and it's really pleasing to hear that we are supporting our contractors and our supply chain to learn, develop the tools, report and show what they can do. So I guess I'm just after a bit more about how we might push that further up the agenda, because I see it's sort of third on the list really, and I've seen the action plans for the transport one, and I know you said to it they're a bit weak. I absolutely agree with you. We've got to get targets in there, we've got to get figures in there, we've got to understand where we are. And in my opinion, almost a yearly reduction target I think we should be setting as an authority, so that we can see how we're doing against that progress, because at the moment it's so vast. We're capturing all the data and then we're going, gosh, are we going to get to net zero in 7 years? We're not looking, in my opinion, yearly almost, and being able to see that. So perhaps just a bit of feedback on those points. Thank you.
Okay, so who would like to come back to Gary on that?
I'm happy to come back on that one, Chair. I think
Lovely, Tom. Thank you.
you're absolutely right. 78% it is the area that we need to tackle and that we need to consider in a lot more detail. It's an area that scope 3 emissions are going to be the highest across most organisations, but that doesn't change the importance or the focus that needs to be placed there. Our procurement team of commercial services, they're doing a lot of fantastic work in this area. They are really getting into the detail and breaking down that 78% into the contracts in terms of where we're spending the most money and where that is producing the most carbon. And then they're trying to target working with services, but also working with suppliers to understand how we put in place robust plans in terms of the contracts we already have, but then in new contracts. The importance of working with our local suppliers isn't lost on commercial services either. They're really keen to work with our local suppliers to build that expertise and that knowledge, and also to almost give a competitive advantage, not in a, keeping within the procurement regulations, but to really support our local suppliers. Because if you're looking at emissions from the perspective of where we procure the services from and having to travel and factor in all the delivery, etc., local is definitely better. So I would say it is, reassure it is an area that a lot of work is being undertaken. Commercial services gave a very good presentation to Climate Programme Board last week. I'm sure they would be happy to come to this forum and provide some more detail if you did wish to hear that.
Okay, Councillor. Yes, please do, Councillor Jackie. Yeah.
Thank you. I did put my hand up, but I didn't want to be sort of left in the lurch. Yeah, I think this is a really good question, Councillor Gary, and it's one of the most challenging things that we've got here, which is 6.5 years. And when you keep saying that, then you realise just how much of an emergency this is. And we do experience it as an emergency, which is why Councillor Richard is here in his role as Cabinet Member for emergencies. And we have recognised that. The Climate and Nature Emergency Climate Board, which is a group set up by, which Tom has just alluded to, which is an officer board, does sort of fit into this in an extremely useful way, and is that they raise the issues as they're coming along. They can see where the problem areas are and we can focus on them. But procurement is the biggest issue. Procurement is the one that's most challenging to us because it's not all in our control. Much of it is, but a lot of it isn't in our control, and we have to figure out a way how we can start influencing that in different ways. And we have Wayne Webley, who is the new procurement officer, who's come in and provided us with a really useful way forward, a strategy that we're all signing up to, because it is massive, and we know that. So I just thought that might help as well, Councillor Gary, in sort of understand, which I think you already know about as well. And then the action plans that flow out of that. We always have to have action plans because you can't measure yourself unless you have an action plan. And we're beginning to put those together now. And I think they're beginning to come together in a way which is productive, but also can provide us with the assurance that we need. But it goes beyond powers. It's not just us, it's everybody has a responsibility here. And I think we're beginning to find ways of doing that as well through the PSB and through the Mid Wales Energy Plan as well. So it's kind of like the butterfly, isn't it, that lands on the pond. There's lots and lots of ripple effects going out, and it's just trying to capture all those ripples, finding out what we can do and perhaps putting aside what we can't do. But I think one of the other big areas that we've got to consider is none of this is going to come without an investment. And that's our big goal at the moment, is to figure out what that investment is now as a matter of urgency, so we can start planning for that, and perhaps also planning in amongst that the transition, what we can do now and have an impact that isn't going to cost us anything, and what we need to do which is going to cost us, and what we can do about that, how we can raise that money, how we're going to find that, and as Tom said earlier, how we still continue to deliver all the services that we're expected to do as well. So just wanted to sort of capture that as well. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackie. Councillor Adrian, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just reiterate what the portfolio has just said. You know, the biggest risk to this being successful is not the willingness, it's the financial cost to our budget. But I just want an explanation really from Tom. I'm a bit confused. Education really is more an explanation. Carbon neutral by 2030, you've mentioned in a few slides. Then you mentioned net zero by 2030. I mean, there's a fundamental difference. The target from the government is net zero by 2050. So am I looking into something wrong, or is there is a difference, surely?
Yeah, so the 2030 target is in Wales is just for public sector. So Welsh Government wanted to show that the public sector are leaders, and as leaders we would commit to being net zero by 2030. The 2050 target is absolutely the target for the whole of Wales to be net zero. Essentially is that they want the public sector to be that first mover to really make sure that our operations are net zero, and then to work with communities towards that 2050 target.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Adrian. Councillor Glynn?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on, well, I suppose picking up on some of the points that Gary had made earlier about that scope 3. I'm just wondering whether Tom or another officer or Councillor Jackie could give us any examples, because obviously it was 2020 that the climate emergency was declared. I'm just wondering whether there are any examples of success that we've had in reducing those kind of indirect emissions. And if the answer is no, or you can't give any specific examples, what are we doing to share best practice across the rest of Wales and indeed the rest of the UK as well?
Do you want me to answer that now, Chair?
Yes, please, if you can.
Yes, if I can. It's off the top of my head, Councillor Glynn, so I'll do my best here. I think what we've had to start with, when we came in as the administration last year, we didn't know where we were. We had absolutely no idea where we were at all, apart from the fact that we were gathering information for the carbon accounts. We had got a motion to declare a climate emergency, and we had got a motion now to declare a nature emergency as well. So all of those things I think are positives, and they provide us with a benchmark. We have had several strategies that have come out. The first one, I think I'll go back to the Powys County Council climate change strategy, which I think it's actually was quite a good benchmark. It's not a perfect strategy, and I think I was one of the councillors who criticised it at the time when it came out. But it is a strategy, it's a benchmark, and we're using that very much to engage and support our local communities to do things as well. So I suppose for me, one of the big areas that we have made a difference, and I'd like to think that we can use as an exemplar elsewhere, is the way that we've had to work, because we've had to do this, is to start engaging with our local communities. And we've done that in several ways. We've got a climate and nature emergency conference coming up in 2 weeks' time, which many of you on this call will be involved in and are attending. And the raison d'etre behind that, if you like, was to engage with our town and community councillors, because we know that they've got a lot more people out there than we have within the county council, and they do an awful lot more work that we're not recognised and we're not capturing at the moment. So my view is that if we can get people in our town and community councillors to walk this walk with us, then we can actually make considerable changes that we wouldn't be able to do on our own. And I think that's really, really crucial and really important. And as a result of that, we have got, and now we now have a steering group, which is made up of members, but feeding into that steering group will be a stakeholder group, which again, we'll be launching in a couple of weeks' time, which is again, engaging and supporting and listening and learning from the people of Powys, so our stakeholders. So I think, again, that's something that I would really like to share elsewhere. So that's a couple of things, and they're kind of periphery things, if you like. But I think the other big area that we have made a difference is within the Climate Management Board, which has come together now. Out of that is flowing the action plans, which will flow out to our stakeholders. They will actually have a say in these action plans and help us to move them forward as well. And those action plans are beginning to come together. It's taken quite some time to get our heads around it. What is it that we want to achieve? We still don't know what 2030 looks like. We don't know what it is going to look like, and we're working. We've got Councillor Adam and Councillor Jeremy. Neither of them are here to speak up for themselves today, but they've been doing an enormous amount of work in the background, is holding our feet to the fire, but also challenging us and saying, well, what will this look like? What are we trying to achieve? And I think that's the important part of our work at the moment. That would be something really useful to share with others if we can actually come up with that. So I think I'll stop there, but it gives you a flavour, I think, of culturally what we're trying to achieve here, but also strategically what we're trying to achieve, and knowing how difficult it's going to be. But believe me, our work is to get to 2030 and be net zero. That is what our work is all about. I hope that helps a bit.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, I apologise, that phrase wicked problem just pops into my head every time we talk about this. And I apologise if that was a little bit of a wicked question. I suppose I'll just say, specifically focusing on that scope 3, that indirect stuff, I suppose I'd just like to add my weight behind Councillor Gary's suggestion of those yearly targets, because actually we need a target to hold your feet to the fire over, I suppose, Councillor Jackie.
I think one of them you could perhaps hold our feet to the fire on is on purchase of fuel, and how we can do that. We can't give you a lot of background at the moment, but as Matt Perry alluded to earlier, we've started to talk to somebody about what we might be able to do as a bit of an experiment. And a lot of this is about experimenting. We know that there are lots of new technologies coming forward. We know hydrogen's in the background, but it's not quite here yet. We know that EVs are there, but they're not the tool that we're going to go to for everything, because we know that's got problems. There may be new technologies that we're just not aware of at the moment that are going to come forward. All of those are going to take investments. But we're having a look at something that might not take any investment. There will be some cost to it, but may not have an investment. But it's going down that route to seeing, well, is something that we can do where we can actually procure something which is going to benefit our targets. But it needs a bit of an experiment.
Thank you, Jackie. Now, of course, it is a massive subject, isn't it? I mean, climate, it's going to affect everything that we do, and that's why it's important that the council looks across all its areas of work. And I'm aware that the climate emergency has been broken down into 5 areas: that transport and mobility, governance, procurement, buildings and land, and energy. And today we've got the action plans here for the transport and mobility sections of that, and I think it's what we do that affects our residents. So how we deliver those services on the ground in each of those areas, and how those will impact on that bigger picture, isn't it? So for today we're here to concentrate on the transport and mobility section of those, and I know Matt has shared his action plans with us. So really now I'm looking to the panel for questions with particular relevance to those areas, and let's dig down into what we're doing as a council in those areas to meet this bigger target. So Councillor Gary, if I could bring you in there, if your questions are specifically for Matt and Paul and John, who's joined us. John Fussey is Senior Manager for Corporate Fleet and Transport. So welcome, John, and thank you for joining us. So Councillor Gary, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I can make it specific to that, but perhaps also a fairly general element to it as well. But I think it's worth highlighting the point that Powys has got a role to, let's say, get its house into order and try and reach that 2030 target, but we've got a much wider role to try and get our wider community to reach it by at least 2050, and that's really problematic and really challenging. And I think Welsh Government has got that approach of, let's start with the people that we support and control first and then let them feed out and trickle out. So no problem with that, but just reminding us that it's not just our own internal work that we've got to do here. But in terms of the action plans, they're definitely obviously lacking figures in the main, but what I sort of saw from the immediate scan through of it was finance is going to be an issue, and I guess I'm just concerned how we remove that issue and look at creative ways of financing, because we can buy and build homes if there's a 50-year return on it. Surely we've got to be able to look at our investment along those very similar lines, or even further. If we can invest in the right energy production facility and over a period of 60 years it reduces our carbon footprint and costs the same sort of amount over that period, then that's okay. We can't just say we've got to find funding for it. I think we've got to be brave enough to say that is the right technology that we're going to invest in, and let's invest in it. And we make some mistakes along the line. That's okay, because it is emerging, it is developing all the time, it is changing, and costs are changing. But that's one thing I'd like to just tweeze out about how we remove that initial barrier of funding, because that's going to be a critical challenge across whatever we do. And we've sort of declared those emergencies. We've got to keep it at the top of it, but yet we've still got to deliver all of our essential services. So I get that. And then my only other point was around how if we are we externally auditing this work? Because we're saying we're using some models, we're doing X, Y, Z, but is anyone actually looking over our shoulder or going to be looking over our shoulder and saying, really, is that the right figure you're using for your fuel mileage? And what's the chain to get that data? Thank you.
So who would like to answer that one then?
If it's all right, I'll pick up on the first point. I think it is worth noting that the financials, it does frighten me in terms of how much investment we do need, and I think and I'd be keen to come back to this scrutiny in 6 months' time with the Mobility and Transport Action Plan and really just set out what we think the costs are going to be for many of these. So within the Mobility and Transport Action Plan, we've got department infrastructure. So obviously we're going to need investment in all our depots, for example. There is funding stream. So I think we've got to admit that there will be funding through Welsh Government, much of it focused on electrification of fleet. So that's one element. Internal fleet, again, that's something that we'll have to look at. And again, that it potentially could be cost, but I pick up on Councillor Gary's point whether, again, it's about that longer term investment. Active travel is a lot more difficult to measure the carbon reductions in that, but we've got it as part of our plan. Public transport, that's going to be another big element, again, working with Welsh Government. So I think it's not all doom and gloom. There will be some investment from Welsh Government. We just, I suppose, need to know now, so we can work with them and plan it better. And then, as Councillor Jackie mentioned earlier, staff, business and commuting since COVID, the reduction in car mileage throughout the council has reduced, and we've still been able to meet, and there's been almost like a win-win situation. So staff mileage has gone down, CO2 has gone down. So it's all these types of things. So I give a commitment today that within 6 months, whilst we haven't got dates and costs within the mobility and transport plan, that we will have those and dates that we'll challenge ourselves. We won't set unrealistic targets, but targets that we can come back to in 6 months and say, right, this is what we're working to. So the other point probably is more for Tom on the second point.
Sorry, Councillor Mitchell, could you just repeat that second point for me?
Yeah, it was just about external audit of our figures, if you like, our methodology even. Is there going to be somebody looking over our shoulders to say, not sure about that, or challenging us? Because you're right in highlighting the skills gap is massive. I mean, we're all learning this sort of journey, but who's there to either help us or just question, are we doing the right thing? Are we on track? Are we in line with other local authorities?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of existing forums that we can do that in, and there's one that we're looking to set up, which will provide a bit of external challenge and support from external stakeholders as well. So we have the Welsh Local Government Association Forum, which brings together climate and nature officers from across the public sector in Wales, and that's very much a forum to share understanding, share challenges, share best practice, and also work together to understand, you know, common issues that we're facing, such as financing the delivery of net zero. How do we overcome it? How are others doing it? So that areas that potentially we're doing better in, which is looking at our procurement, others can learn from us, and then other areas that are maybe better in buildings or transport, we can learn from them. In terms of we have to report our carbon accounts yearly to Welsh governments. That's another process where we're hoping to improve the communication with them to identify the challenges we're having, but also to understand what opportunities for support there are from Welsh Government, Energy Service, etc., to support us to move forward. And then the last element is that climate stakeholder group that we're looking to set up. That very much is to share with a broad range of stakeholders across the region who have fantastic skills in areas that will support us where we do have a deficit, to understand and challenge and help us shape the action plans moving forward, so that we're not only just delivering for our own house 2030, but as you say, we are then looking at how we can support communities and residents a bit further to try and make that 2050 target easier or sooner.
Okay, John, I can see you've just put your hand up. Would you like to come in there?
Yeah, just to try and reassure Councillor Gary as well around there's some actually quite innovative and quite exciting work going on across local authorities in Wales on this very issue on fleet replacement. And it's hot off the press. I've had an update from Anne Phillips, the Deputy Section 151 officer, where we're starting to talk now to other local authorities about pooling budgets, collaborating on getting the bigger number of vehicles, so we can start muscling in on our with our suppliers to say, actually, we want to place an order here for 150 chassis of electric vehicles or something like that. Whereas the private sector have they just swamped the limited supply. So I think from an officer point of view, this is really, really exciting. It's not, I can't remember us talking about pooling budgets together to get a better resource before. So this issue has gone massively up the agenda across our finance colleagues. So hopefully we're treading in the right direction on this. The other thing to try and reassure you about challenge is we have been previously engaged a company called Energy to help us with our fleet transition plans. They've got vast amounts of experience in this. They're currently helping Welsh Government, Transport for Wales with their decarbonisation plans. They've also recently, I just say done it, but they've helped Brisbane City Council in Australia go to an electric fleet of vehicles. So there's lots of learning, and we will continue to learn and be supported by seeing what's going on globally, because this isn't just a Welsh issue. This is a global issue for us to sort of collaborate and learn from as well.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Chair. My question is really with the 6.5 years left, and with the transport transition and investment, with the fleet as it stands now, and with buying the new fleet of EVs, will the old fleet be sold off to pay for that, first of all?
I'll try and answer that. But we work on a cyclic. Basically, there's a fund which funds the replacement of vehicles, and the services repay that. Effectively, part of what I do is I almost like the bank manager. The services come to me and borrow the money to buy the vehicles, and they pay that back over the life of the vehicle. So there is an assumed value that a waste and recycling truck will be worth 5% of its original purchase price in 7 years' time. So we depreciate the vehicle asset down to that by the services paying in to replace that asset. The gap is going to be, we know, for example, a 26-ton refuse diesel RCV costs around about 220,000. Currently, the electric version of that is near 430,000. Plus, then there's the cost of the infrastructure as well to go on top of that. If we're looking at charging, so to a large point, it's the funding is, there is a pot of funding there. It's the gap we need to worry about between what we know it costs today and what we know, or what we think we know it's going to cost in the future when it's time to replace it. We're lucky to some extent, but it doesn't help this particular problem in that we've only just replaced a lot of our fleet with Euro 6, quite low emitting vehicles, but still not carbon neutral. So we've got 5 or 6 years left of these vehicles before we need to start replacing them.
I'm just concerned that, if we do sell some of the older fleet to actually pay for the new EV fleet, will it put pressure on if the actual service doesn't actually work that well, and we need to go back on the old fleet to sort of support the county, if that makes sense?
I think you're right. There's a resilience issue we need to consider. Conway have recently bought a fleet of electric roadside curb sort vehicles, like the ones we operate. They're all electric, so kind of keeping a watch and brief on what they're doing, how reliable they are. We've got experience of operating a 26-ton RCV electric, and to be fair, there have been some teething problems with it. We can't not admit that, but I wouldn't say it's a prototype, but we got one of the very first ones which came off the production line. So I was kind of expecting there to be issues in terms of its range and everything. That's never been an issue. It's based in Brecon. It can run down to Ystrad, collect from 700 properties or whatever it is, come back to Brecon, tip it, and it'll still have plenty of charge left in it. So the range issue, I don't think, is too much of a problem. It's there's lots of sensors and things like that, which I would say it's almost been over-engineered. So it's those are the sort of technical glitches that we are encountering. And yet, yes, we are having to back that vehicle up occasionally with a diesel vehicle. So I think you're right to raise it as an issue, a service resilience issue.
So it's a shorter transgression of these EV vehicles rather than a sort of bulk buy and then selling off the old stock then.
Yeah, sorry, you broke up a little bit, but I think I understood what you said. It's something I'm very aware of. We don't want to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater sort of thing, do we? And just go completely straight into electric without, and that work is continuing. Like I say, watching what Conway are doing, what other local authorities are doing with their electric vehicles, and and learning a lot from our electric vehicles as well. So I think it's a fair point, well made.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Carl.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go back to my original point about hydrogen. I said about the crossroads. I think it's more of a fork in the road, really. I can't see Welsh Government investing in infrastructure in pylons or central government even in Powys. It'll come down to private enterprise, to build wind farms and build that infrastructure in. Obviously, pylons being not great for the voting public out there. Many people object against them. So I think we have a real opportunity here to buy into hydrogen production, wind farms, and have that production on site. We could buy a share into that and power our own vehicles. And I think that's the only way you're going to hit your target. I can't see any other way of doing it. And the farcical thing of my party with net zero for 2050, that's never going to happen, let's face it.
Anybody wish to comment on that?
Hydrogen is clearly a way forward for sort of the heavier truck market. I think that's where the thinking is, you know, sort of 44-ton trucks will be eventually fueled by hydrogen. Hydrogen is not without its challenge as well. If we you know, it's one of the most abundant elements in the universe, isn't it? But it takes an incredible amount of energy to split those atoms to get what we need, which then questions its validity as an environmental source of energy. If it's a byproduct, absolutely, it's just finding that capacity to be able to create it more efficiently, I guess.
And hence why my point about building a hydrogen centre next to a wind farm. You won't have the pylons going out, you'll have the wind farm, the community still has the community benefit, and we have a product that is world leading, and we could be one of the first authorities to do that. Hydrogen is informed cars, with hydrogen cars out there, hydrogen vans, and hydrogen heavy goods vehicles, as you point out. I think going down the route of EV is quick short term, but it's not the longer term answer. Definitely not.
I think you're spot on. I think there's lots. I think it's been mentioned. We could use alternative fuels, reduce our carbon emissions by about 90% overnight. It's still not quite net zero, but it's a heck of a step in the right direction. Is it? Whilst we consider the options such as that, you know, I think that's a really well made argument.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just want to back up what Carl said, really, because, you know, things change so fast. We don't want to be seen to be backing the wrong horse and in 10 years' time, totally committed to something when something else has come along. So, yeah, I'm kind of sort of advocating what Carl said. We've got to look at all avenues and not rush too much, in my belief, because we could be stuck with a system in 10 years' time that is outdated already, because things are changing, and hydrogen in large vehicles is probably the future, because JCB are developing tractors and all sorts. And I think that the truck element is going to be the biggest challenge for us with electric. So I'm just backing up what Carl said, really. So thank you.
Thank you. Tom, you've put your hand up. Did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, I think, you know, I absolutely think we need to explore options, so electric vehicles, hydrogen, alternative fuels, but hydrogen isn't coming forward quickly, and there are, as John said, there's a number of significant issues around hydrogen for transportation and for domestic heating. It's something that has a number of issues because of the chemical makeup of hydrogen and the density of hydrogen, which makes it very difficult to produce, to transport, and then use. So in terms of hydrogen in the short term, and probably before 2030 for transport, I don't think that timescale is going to align. That's not to say in the future it might not be an opportunity, but the costs around producing green hydrogen, even utilizing a wind farm and the curtailment element, just doesn't stack up at this moment in time. So I think it's something we need to be aware of and we need to track, but I don't see that coming on board by 2030.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Gary.
Yeah, we're sort of going to reinforce both sides of that sort of discussion, really. I think Carl's right that we need to have that bold vision to say, look, let's invest and support. And actually, we've got one of our wind farms in that future development proposal that has a hydrogen plant attached onto the outline planning talk. It's not even gone into pre-planning yet, and that then is 5 years away. So you could see those big industry players thinking that, look, this is one of the mechanisms for the future survivability of energy and stuff. But I think we're sort of missing the trick on being able to invest in those. So not doing it ourselves, but let's support those that are doing it and make a return on that investment, because that one that is potentially going to be built is owned by a Swedish government. and that's great, but they've done that wisely because they know that that's where their investment can sort of play out. And I think we'd have to make some brave judgments and do some brave risk assessments, but we've got to start being quite bold with some of what we want to do, because we need things to progress. And I think, Tom, you're right, we're going to miss the boat a bit by 2030, and that's okay. That might not be disastrous, but if that is the right technology, let's make sure we've got it in by 2030 so we can start to roll it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gary. Councillor Corinna.
I just would like to ask Gary, just which wind farm is this with the Swedish government backing?
It's a big one, as you can imagine, looking at hydrogen production, and it tips across 3 actual ward boundaries. So it tips into my Llanbrynmawr northern area of the ward, but mostly it's Llanfachrinian. So it's up in the hills above Foyle, Llangadfen, that region. It's already increased from 14 turbine proposal to 18 now, and these are the ginormous 250 metre ones. But they're looking at a hydrogen production plant and a solar field system battery as well. So they're looking at a multi-use, partly because of that. Where do you put all of that energy at the moment? You can't get it out of the county. We can't use it in the county yet because we can't get it anywhere. So they're looking at potentially a hydrogen production plant, but then you've still got to transport that hydrogen to where you want it to be used. So that's then lorries going back and forwards with hydrogen in, and that will scare a few people as well. So a lot to think about, but at least it's in that pre-planning, or will be in that pre-planning application to tease out.
Thank you very much. And apart from that, I was just interested, going back to the fleet, that you're thinking of liquid LPG conversions for some of the vehicles. And I was also interested in Tom's emphasis on solar, and I wondered, local solar, and I wondered if that's to circumvent the need for grid, infrastructure. I don't know.
Tom, did you want to come back?
I'll cover the second element on solar. I think it's an area that is of importance to us in terms of reducing the energy demand and moving away from fossil fuels on our own buildings. We'll look at energy efficiency and we'll look at on-site solar. In terms of beyond that, we're interested in, as other local authorities, looking at our own land assets and understanding if there's opportunities to produce renewable energy through solar farms. But I think there's also another bit of work that we're starting to consider at the regional level around looking in tandem with the work that's being developed on the local area energy plans around smart local energy systems, which would absolutely cover the point you made, Karina, around looking at how we can use different technologies and different forms of renewable energy to work with a community to improve the energy security and energy provision within those areas. But I think that's something that would need to be commissioned and worked through to get to a clearer picture there. But I think it's something that we certainly need to be looking at and working with our communities through stakeholder groups and other forums to support them towards net zero as well.
Okay, thank you. The first part of that question was about the move to LPG. Is that right, Corinna? So, Matt, would you like to?
Yeah, and John will be a bit more closer to the detail on this, but this potentially could be an investor save. So again, it's not all I'd say doom and gloom, but there are some benefits to some of this investment. So in this particular case, LPG is injected into the or mixed with the diesel, which gives 23% carbon reduction in our fleet. So that's just using existing fleet. So that's no changing it to electric, just using the existing fleet. But the added benefit is there's also a 9.5% fuel reduction by using that. It does require an upfront capital investment, and John will be closer to the detail. But if we focus on all our heavy goods fleet, so that's all our refuse and recycling trucks, then we probably would be looking about 80 to 90k investment. But within 3 years, that would in effect pay for itself. So am I right in saying that, John?
Yeah. That's the numbers quoted about right, about 90,000, and that's including the cost of the LPG as well. But I suppose the immediate saving is as soon as you put this device into you start, over the fleet of waste and recycled vehicles, you're looking at around about 280,000 kilos of carbon being reduced across the year. So it's a fairly significant part of the plan, or one of the many options we're considering, along with other types of fuel and additives as well.
Okay, Councillor Glynn.
Sorry, Chair. I'm going to ask a rather cheeky question, if I may. And it's about the RAG rating. So, for instance, there's reference made to implementing demand responsive transport, and I'm aware of the Welsh Government pilot with the Flexibus service, I think in Pembrokeshire, and I think part of Gwynedd, but I've not seen any evidence of that taking off in Paris yet. And yet all the actions seem to be RAG rated green, including that one. So I'm just wondering whether perhaps there's a little bit of, well, either overly optimistic RAG rating or perhaps that the actions aren't ambitious enough. I suspect it's the former rather than the latter.
I did see the RAG rating as well. I suppose what we can say, in Powys, we've been operating this demand responsive flexi type service for a number of years now. There's, for example, the bus service that operates around Llandrindod is like on a ring and ride type basis. It's operated under Section 11 of the 1985 Transport Act, where we can bring together passengers and put them onto a taxi if they pre-book. So we do that in and around Rhaeadr, Elan Valley and Llandrindod, and there's also another one up in Llanidloes. But it's something that as a model now the world has changed a little bit in terms of travel habits. We perhaps need to consider if that model is a more sustainable model to provide transport across our more rural communities.
Sorry, John. That's really interesting, and interesting that more work's been done on that. But I suppose the point is a wider one, that all of these are RAG rated green, and I'm not sure whether does that accurately reflect the progress that's being made across all of these actions.
I'll defer that to my colleague, Mr. Wizencraft.
Thank you, John. That was a nice rugby pass. That was. Yeah, I think. Obviously, as Matt has alluded to, we'd be looking to bring this sort of document back in 6 months and then council. And in terms, we'd have more specific target dates associated with it then, and we can monitor more closely how we're getting on. So I think at the present time, these action plans are in very, very early stages, and the one you've got before you has been worked up within a matter of a couple of weeks in terms of the detail in there. So I think as time goes on, we'll have a much better handle on how we're progressing. And if we've got, as been spoke about previously, if we've got targets on there, and we can see then if we're not hitting those targets, then obviously those status will start changing, and that will build up the picture as we go along. So I just would say with caution, we were at very early stages at the minute, but we're looking at that just over the hill and hitting those specific target dates. So we've got something we can come back to report on, and you can scrutinise us on it as well, why we're not hitting those targets.
So I think there, Paul, what you're saying is this action plan is telling us what you're thinking about doing, and they're green because it's on your agenda and you're working on it. So I think, as you say, going forward, we're going to need some targets of when is this going to happen, when is it, and then we'll see a true rating of the progress. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. So it's interesting the conversation today, because obviously in HTR, transport and the fleet is a large portion of your emissions and your fuel costs, etc. So everything has really concentrated there. But interesting that Richard put in the chat about the savings and the positive impact on the climate from working from home. So I noticed on here we've got a target for behavioural change. And I wonder what can be done differently. So we're still thinking of bin collection in that lorry going out once a week. I'm thinking about the climate change. We're hearing about wetter winters, hotter summers. So what are we going to do differently in terms of behavioural change, working practice change? Have we considered anything within HTR under those brackets?
We are pushing it out that, people shouldn't be, as much as possible try and work from home, but there's that social aspect as well. So some people do want to go into work and meet colleagues. So it is something that we're working on. But yeah, it is. I suppose it's difficult to sort of quantify that at the moment. But obviously, COVID was the big pusher in terms of that working arrangement. But I for myself, there's perhaps once a fortnight or once a week, I should say, I'll probably attend site, but probably we do need to do more to try and encourage, more people to use Teams rather than commuting, from south of Powys right up to the north. So, but yeah, that's it on that one, Chair.
So it is, there's probably some ideas that haven't even been thought of or invented yet, aren't there, about how things can be done differently. With thinking of hotter summers, do we run the risk that more people are going to get air conditioning machines? So how are they going to run, and the impact of that on the environment? And these wetter winters, well, we talked about previously, how are we going to manage that in terms of our storm drains and flooding in towns and villages, and the impacts that has on infrastructure and the economy of the county?
And that's absolutely bang on. And I think looking at this action plan, this is about being proactive and what we can do as an authority, along with other organizations and across the world, in terms of putting these measures in. But I think we've got to acknowledge that as a result of climate change, there is going to be hotter summers, more intense flooding, and as an authority, I've noticed in the time that I've been with Powys, we've had storms that last year we had literally 3 or 4 storms one day after another, and at the moment the infrastructure is not coping. So whilst we need to be looking forward to try and reduce our emissions, we also need to look at what we need to do to try and deal and protect the public, from these, as we said, the hot summers. Our staff out collecting waste and recycling, in scorching hot weather, there's things like that. Now we need to start thinking about where before used to be, perhaps once every few years. It's guaranteed now every year. We haven't had rain for 3 or 4 weeks at the moment, and all these things have an impact. So whilst we need to be looking forward to reduce emissions, you're totally right. We need to be looking at how we operate our services now to deal with the causes of climate change.
The impacts. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yeah. Councillor Jackie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just come back on the behavioural change and what we can do about that, and also just to share with you that this particular action plan, the Mobility and Transport Action Plan, has been brought together with stakeholders. So we've continually worked with stakeholders since last August to bring in their ideas, their thoughts as well. So this isn't just a council-led action plan here. We have actually brought in quite a lot of ideas that have come from outside of the council. And we've accepted that's, or not accepted, but we've been delighted that actually has improved the action plan enormously. And I don't think we could have done it without them. With some of the smaller things that you perhaps don't think about when you're sort of involved in the council and not looking outwards. But the behavioural change is something that we've talked about fairly recently in this action plan, because I'm actually been involved with building this one up as well, in that it's to do things like active travel. Are we really sharing the benefits of active travel? Is that actually changing people's behaviour? Is the understanding that pedestrians and cyclists are more important than vehicles on the road now? Are those things hitting home? And we don't think they are. So behavioural change is extremely important as part of this action plan. Are we talking about public transport as being better than other types of transport? Is it something that people are willing to do now? Are they willing to get on the bus? Do they want concessionary fares extended? Do they want a bus to come every half hour like we've been promised by the Welsh Government? And we know that in Powys it's not going to happen. Or do we say to people, well, we can do it a different way, and what do you think we can do to achieve this? So all of that is in the behavioural change. It isn't just about staffing. And just to let you know that if Matt and I have to go to different parts of the county for meetings, if we have to go, if they're in person, then we always car share. And it's incredibly positive because we actually share a huge amount of information. We have a lot of exchanges of what needs to be done, what isn't being done, where we've got issues. And so those car journeys, when they're shared, are actually really productive. So there's all kinds of different things that we can do. The seasonal working that we're doing in the south of Powys, that has been very, very supported by staff. It has made a difference. We don't know what the outcomes are yet, but it is making a difference. The 4-day working will make a difference as well, especially in places like HTR where people have to come into work. They can't work from home, but if you can reduce the number of times that they actually travel to work, then that will benefit. So there's lots and lots in there, which I think will come under just one heading, which is behavioural change. So I hope that gives a bit of assurance to councillors here this morning that it's definitely something that we are addressing. And actually, we've got some really good officers as well in the authority that have been part of behavioural training in the past, behavioural change rather, and are bringing a lot of skills that they haven't used for a number of years, that they're beginning to think, you know, this is the time to bring those skills out again.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Jackie. Councillor Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I was just following on the point I think that Matt made about mitigating the effects of climate change, because everything that we talked about this morning is playing our part in reducing CO2 emissions and thereby averting climate change. But we do have to mitigate against consequences at the same time. And that, I suppose, is where my portfolio in connection with emergencies comes in, and there's an overlap here with the biodiversity emergency and that whole stream of work, and what we can do to alleviate flood risk through upland land management, changing upland land management, reducing the risk of flash flooding, etc. And I think that's a whole separate topic, which maybe at a future time your committee will want to scrutinise our work in that area, because it's the other half of our two emergencies, as it were.
Yeah, and actually buildings and land is one of the 5 areas that fall under this. So we will be having that before us at some point. I understand. Tom is nodding, so that's good news. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Richard, that would be really important then to hear about what's happening there. I mean, in my area, we've just had hill fires, so it lasted over 5 days, so complete opposite end to the flooding, but a huge impact on the climate and nature. Yeah. Okay, so I turn back to my committee. Last opportunities now for final questions. There are no hands up. I'm going to ask Councillor Bryan. We haven't heard from Bryan today, just to see, have you got any comments? I know this is an area you've got lots of knowledge in, Bryan. So would you like to come in?
No, I think my main concern is we're obviously having meetings about what services we can provide, but costing all of this is what we're not going to be providing. And as local members, we're going to have a lot of, and how can I say the word I'm looking for? We've got roads now that we don't need traffic coming because they need resurfacing. But that budget is going to be cut. That's the major concern. Has this all been, where's the cost of the government? What's government going to give us some? You know, that's my main concern, is that
how we finance it all.
Yeah, you know, because we, as local members, you know, you can explain to the public, but you can't explain to a local farmer in Glenavon anything about why we're doing it to do with biodiversity or things like that. You know, they're interested, if it's snowing, they want that road cleared. And I think, John, I feel fair play. I've been an officer of the authority for 40 years. I feel sorry for the likes of John and Matt and Paul. It's not an easy task to come up with these answers, to be honest. It's right for us to sit here and question them, but it isn't easy because there's nothing you can go in the shop and buy. You've got to try it at all. But our main concern is we've still got to provide services to the public, whether it's education, leisure centres, roadways, footways, recycling. And that's my main concern, that all of this is coming at quite an expensive cost.
Yeah, I think silence is agreement there that the finance is always going to be challenging, isn't it? Which is probably why we've got to have some of that out of the box thinking and that behavioural change. But I'm delighted to see that Tom has put his hand up. So perhaps you can respond to that, Tom.
I think it's a very good point, and I think it emphasises the challenge we have in front of us around how we take this forward, how we make the right decisions, how we fund the work to be undertaken. I think in terms of the delivery of services, it is something we are looking at through, and I know it's changed names, so if I got the name wrong, I apologise, Re-Imaging Paris. This for me is one conversation. It's not Re-Imaging Paris and Net Zero. They're collective. That's a conversation you have at the same time, because when you're looking at how we deliver services and how we change behaviours and how we can look for ways that we can deliver the service to the same level but potentially more efficiently, you're making savings through being more efficient that then can potentially go towards delivery of net zero. So I think it's absolutely a massive challenge, and I don't think any of us have the answers yet, but we're hopefully working towards those answers, and very much appreciate all the challenge and comment in this session today.
Thank you, Tom. And just to answer Brian, just so you know, Brian, I think next month Matt is bringing to Scrutiny the winter maintenance plan that you've been doing a lot of work on, haven't you, Matt and Jackie? So you'll get to ask your questions about snow, etc. then.
Yeah, that should
I
be
can see
quite
Matt's delighted to bring that before us.
You mentioned winter maintenance, it impacts on everybody, doesn't it? So yeah, but it does. We've had the survey results. I was hoping to bring it to this one, but they're still going through the responses. And to be fair, Powys residents have really put a big input into it. So it will be good to have that debate in the next scrutiny.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Matt, have you got it separated between urban and rural for the winter maintenance?
In what respect?
Well, in the towns, you don't get so many complaints really only about the footpaths. But once you get in,
right, okay.
when you get out in the rural areas, I haven't seen part of what's been going on, but I've got a couple of roads that I'm still shocked that they're not part of.
I'm actually going to stop you there, Brian, because we will discuss this next month, and I think we could spend another hour here this morning if we go into that. I'm going to let Matt off the hook there, and he'll bring that to us next month. I'm just going to call in Liz to see if Liz has any questions or anything she'd like to raise.
Thank you, Chair. No questions from me, but I've found it very interesting listening to all the comments and the questions, and particularly because this is the second time now that I've seen some of this information. We are looking forward from Brecon Town Council to presenting at the climate change event next week. So yeah, thank you all.
Lovely. Okay, so final call to the panel members, councillors, any comments or questions? And so to our officers, if you've got anything else you'd like to add?
I think Chair, we were just looking at what Tom said. I think we were looking at the sustainable Powys now, not re-imaging Powys as well. That's more the slogan. Yeah.
And I think that fits in nicely, doesn't it, with the work and all that you're discussing here today. Okay, so if there's no further comments, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today, officers and councillors, portfolio holders, cabinet members. Appreciate that. I think we could probably go on for another hour, but I'm afraid our time is up now. So thank you very much. So our next item on the agenda is the scrutiny work programme. So Rachel, I don't know if you want to come in there.
The work programme, Chair, is just to acknowledge what's coming up in the near future, but obviously it is subject to change, as we've heard from Matt, that the winter maintenance will be on next month's agenda.
Yeah, so I think Matt's going to have a busy time next month because we've got the revision of transport policy, buildings and land, the climate and action plan, and workforce planning. I think that's right, isn't it? And then the winter maintenance. So quite a busy month next month. Okay, thank you. Well, then that brings the meeting to an end, the formal part of the meeting to the end. If the committee would just say online for our closing